Hey, so in this video we're doing the Easter eggs and prediction for Season 5, Episode 20, or 22 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But we're spoilers, not cut up, plus I'll be doing prediction for Season 6. So, yeah. There weren't a lot of Easter eggs or references in this episode, but the episode title itself was called The End, and a lot of people were trying to figure out what that meant and whatnot, and I assumed it was just the end of the time loop, because that's what they were dealing with, and it's a possibility there because they ended up breaking the time loop here, but it's a possibility. It was also most likely a reference to how they're handling the showrunners were actually handling this episode, because they did not know if they were getting a season 6, so they decided to call it The End because it was possibly going to be the end of the series. So yeah, and a lot of people do not like this theory or whatever, but I personally think the title of The End could possibly mean also the end of Coulson's story, because the way that they ended this episode, it would be a nice send-off. I'll get to a why in a bit, but I do really like the way that they sent it off as where they left it off for Coulson's story. I'm not saying he can't come back in like a smaller role or whatever, like in flashbacks or whatever, similar to how they handled Lance Hunter this season, where he was only in one episode, and he was a main character for a couple seasons, but he had to leave and whatnot. So yeah, he could do that. They could do that, but like I said, I really liked how they ended his storyline, and a lot of people were confused about how the time loop changed and whatnot, and there were two instances of how it changed. The first one is the first one was the major one anyway, that I personally believe is when Fitz and May went to go save Robin, or to save Mac and Polly, because in the previous time loop those two characters were supposed to have died. And if you remember in episode 5, in that episode, Fitz was given a drawing of a woman's death with two black hooded creatures with razor claw things, and those were most likely supposed to be the Remoraths. So at some point, those Remoraths were supposed to have killed a woman, and that was most likely supposed to be Polly. So having Fitz intervene in that it's called death, or the deaths, that's how it happened, because Robin even said you have to save them. So two of them, Mac and Polly. So that's where I think it most likely changed in a more drastic way, because there were some people that said Daisy never had the centipede serum in her gauntlets in the previous loop, but that would not have worked, because in this episode they even showed what Voss's videotape was about, where Daisy was leaving the Quinjet, and that was the last time they saw her, and she was yelling at someone, and the only way for this scene to play out in the previous loop would have been Daisy yelling at Coulson for not taking the serum that she thought about in the first place. So she always had the centipede serum in her gauntlets, she just never used it in the previous loop, until most likely Fitz saved Mac and Polly, and that's how it all diverted, because they made different decisions after that. That's just my opinion on how I took it, but yeah. And there was a little bit of funny little line here that Mac used when the team was fighting about whether or not to save Coulson or save the world. Mac intervenes in this conversation, fight, and he says the team needs hope. A lot of people thought about his daughter, Hope. His daughter's name was Hope, so it's funny that he used that line. But in this debate, whether or not to save Coulson or save the world, I want to know where you are in this debate, because I personally believe saving Coulson would have been the safer bet, and it's instead of or if it wasn't for him to put it in the centipede serum or the centipede serum in Daisy's gauntlets, because killing Talbot in the way of using the odium and all that kind of stuff has a lot of more dangerous implications than giving the centipede serum with Jiaying's healing factor to Coulson, because if they weren't really thinking about how long it would take an effect of the odium to kick in to killing Graviton, and if that were the case, if it didn't happen right away, then for that bit of period of time, Graviton would have an extra boost of powers, and it would be able to destroy the world. So that they would have already been back again, destroying the world. And then you had actually the after effects of killing Graviton. If you remember a couple episodes ago, Yo-Yo killed Ruby, and it destroyed their equipment and knocked out the SHIELD team that was in that room. So, and Ruby only had 8%, whereas Graviton has 92+% of gravitonium getting more. So if the odium didn't kick in right away, or once it kicked in, the world could be destroyed because of that big blast that happened. So either way, using the odium on Graviton would not have been the best scenario ever. But Coulson does bring up a good point in this episode. Giving the centipede serum to Coulson, with Jiaying's healing factor and all that kind of stuff, would be very, very horrible in a way, because what he said to Simmons was, you remember me carving in the walls, and you know how it all ended with Garrett, where Garrett turned out crazy and psychopath because of all the stuff that he had in his system, whereas Coulson has the centipede, or he would have had the centipede serum in him. He would have had a bit of the GH325, which Garrett had, that made him crazy, and then had, on the added bonus, the fire of the magical fire of Ghost Rider. So I don't know what would happen if Coulson were to have taken that, but I'm glad that Coulson actually never forced it on him. I'm actually glad the SHIELD team allowed him to choose what he wanted, because he's always he said in a previous episode and whatnot that he already had another he didn't want another unnatural life extension, and this would be another life extension, and he didn't want that. So forcing another life extension on that, you'd be as worse as Fury and the other SHIELD agents that forced Coulson to be alive in the first place, of why this show existed. So I'm glad that May and the rest of the team actually gave him the choice of whether or not he's going to live or die. So that's one of my reasons why I actually appreciate the way the show actually ended his story arc, because it's his decision on whether or not he lives or dies. It's no one else's, and if he were to have chose this, he would not have had he might not have actually lived long after that, because he's still a SHIELD agent, so he could die in the field, whereas here he's actually finally come to terms with death, and has been able to say I love you to Daisy and all that kind of stuff, and say goodbye, whereas if he were a SHIELD agent, he would not be able to say goodbye. So I really appreciate how they handle that. But comment down below if you have a different opinion. I really, really appreciated that. And then we had the whole end scenes stuff, where we had May May and Coulson are on Tahiti, where Coulson does say it's a magical place and all that kind of stuff. So he finally gets to go to Tahiti. He's happy. He's going to live his life as he wants, of going to do his bucket list and all that kind of stuff before he dies. I don't know if he's going to die before the end or before season 6 starts or whatever. I don't know how long of a time jump it is, but we might not see his death, and we might see a funeral or whatever. But yeah, and then before he gets, we actually see that he's on Tahiti. The Coulson is like doing a remembrance or like a memorial retirement party type thing, and they're reminiscing, like talking about their history and all that kind of stuff, and how they missed the bus and stuff like that. It's a nice little callback to the bus, because Yo even says, "I wish I knew you back then," and Simmons says, "We were different people back then," and that is completely true. Simmons and everyone is totally different from how far they've come so far from season 1. Like I've said it before, but yeah. And there's a little bit of confusion I have, because I don't know exactly how to read the Daisy scene at the end. Like, she is happy and all that kind of stuff that she is able to accept her dad's death and all that kind of stuff, even though as much as she could. But then once they started to get ready to find Fitz in in space somewhere with Enoch, she puts on the dashboard her hula girl bobblehead. We haven't seen it since season 4, the framework skies stuff, but we never really seen her as Daisy. So I don't know if that's like reverting back to a simpler time, or it's like her remembrance of Coulson in a way. I don't know how to read that. Just comment down below what you think, because she's never really had it as she never really shown it as Daisy, I don't believe. Maybe once, but I could be wrong. But yeah. And then for predictions now. Actually a little bit of a funny detail. When Daisy and Deke were talking to each other, Deke has this thing that he says he's reading up on idiomatic expressions. It's a book about basically stuff that, a way of learning how to speak Fitz and Simmons so he could understand them more, because there were a couple instances in this season where he was Fitz said, "You're a canary in a coal mine," and Simmons says, "Can I pick your brain?" So he tried to figure out what those meant and all that stuff. So I really appreciate that he had a little bit of a mini arc there. So yeah, for predictions, I'm assuming since it's a pretty bad idea that Graviton was shot out into space, because we know the Confederacy wanted the Gravitonium, and now all Tarian needs to do is find the Graviton and dissect him and all that kind of stuff, and the Gravitonium probably would still be in effect. So that's probably dangerous going forward. And one of my hopes or dreams or whatever is that I want to see the character of Stonewall, who's Jerry Sledge. She's the son of Absorbing Man and all that kind of stuff. So I want to see him appear next season, since now we have Absorbing Man dead. And it would be cool to see Piper and Davis as series regular now that Coulson is gone, most likely gone or whatever. And I'm not sure if, and also Skrulls would be a cool way of tying the Kree back to the Skrulls and all that kind of stuff, because it's tied to Captain Marvel, which Coulson is going to be in Captain Marvel, so it'd be cool to see that. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one that's scared about it, but are you scared to see Mac getting injured next season? Because every single director before him has been injured. just kind of scared to see him next season. So comment down below if I missed any Easter eggs or references. See ya.